The phone call came 3 days before Thanksgiving. My mother's voice was careful, measured, like she was delivering news about a funeral. She told me not to come this year. My sister Courtney was bringing her new boyfriend Blake home to meet the family, and she specifically requested I not be there. Mom explained that Courtney was embarrassed by my blue-collar job as a construction foreman and didn't want Blake to know she had a brother who works with his hands. I quietly accepted this, feeling the familiar sting of being the family disappointment. I hung up and stared at my work boots by the door, wondering when things went so wrong between us. 5 days after Thanksgiving, I was in my small apartment having my morning coffee before heading to the construction site. It was Monday, around 7 in the morning, and I was going over the day's work schedule in my head. The crew had to finish pouring foundation for a new office building, and the weather forecast looked good. I was buttering toast when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find both my parents standing there. My mother, Linda, looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing sweatpants instead of her usual coordinated outfits. My father, Frank, stood beside her, his face red and tight with anger. They didn't wait for an invitation. They pushed past me into my apartment. My mother whirled around. Her voice came out sharp and accusing. "Why didn't you tell us?" I blinked, confused. "Tell you what?" "About the trust," my father barked. "About Grandma Phyllis's money." My stomach dropped like I'd just fallen off scaffolding. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew exactly what had happened. My mother started pacing my small living room. She spoke fast, words tumbling over each other. "Thanksgiving dinner went perfectly," she said. "The turkey was moist, the sides were delicious. Everyone loved Blake. He was charming, polite, well-dressed. He worked as a senior financial advisor at some major investment firm downtown. Courtney was glowing the entire evening. Then, during dessert, Courtney announced her engagement. My mother's voice cracked when she said this, like she was reliving the moment. Everyone was thrilled, she said. Champagne was opened. Toasts were made. Blake's parents were on speakerphone from their vacation home in Scottsdale, offering congratulations. And then, during the celebration, Blake mentioned he'd been trying to reach the trustee about some estate paperwork. Just casually, like it was nothing. He said he'd been emailing Howard for weeks about the annual review. The entire dinner table went silent. Courtney asked what trustee, what estate, what was Blake talking about? Blake looked confused. He glanced around the table. He said, "Your grandmother's trust." He'd been trying to contact Howard Morrison about reviewing the estate holdings because he wanted to understand his future wife's financial picture before they got married. Responsible planning, he called it. That's when everything exploded. Courtney demanded to know what Blake meant. Blake, now realizing he'd stepped into something, explained that Howard was listed as the sole trustee and executor of Phyllis Morrison's estate. The estate was worth approximately $55 million. Courtney had no idea. My parents had no idea. My mother stopped pacing and stared at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Why didn't you tell us that you control your sister's inheritance?" My father stepped closer. His voice was low and dangerous. "You're a construction foreman, Howard. You pour concrete and swing hammers. Why the hell would your grandmother make you the trustee of $55 million? I took a breath. I'd known this day would come eventually. I just hadn't expected it like this. I explained as calmly as I could. Grandma Phyllis set up the trust 6 years ago when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She had maybe 4 months to live, and she wanted to make sure Courtney would be taken care of. But Grandma was worried. She'd watched Courtney blow through money her entire adult life. Designer clothes, expensive trips, luxury cars she couldn't maintain. Courtney had no concept of budgeting or saving. So Grandma designed a trust with specific conditions. Courtney would receive a monthly allowance of $8,000. Comfortable, but not extravagant. The bulk of the money would stay invested until Courtney turned 35 years old. She was currently 32. The other option for early release was, if Courtney got married to someone Grandma approved of, someone who wasn't after the money, someone who could demonstrate genuine love and stability, Grandma made me the trustee because she trusted my judgment. She said I was level-headed. She said I understood the value of money because I earned every dollar I made. She didn't trust my parents because they'd enabled Courtney's spending habits, and she certainly didn't trust Courtney to manage it herself. I'd been doing exactly what Grandma asked. I managed the investments carefully. I sent Courtney her monthly allowance. Never late. Never missed a payment. The money had grown from $42 million to $55 million under my management. I'd tried reaching out to Courtney multiple times over the years about financial planning, about preparing for when she'd eventually receive the full amount. She never responded. She thought my emails were just boring family stuff and ignored them. My mother's face turned red. "You've been controlling her money and lying to us for 6 years?" "I wasn't lying," I said quietly. "I was honoring Grandma's wishes. She specifically told me not to tell you until Courtney showed signs of maturing. She was worried you'd pressure me to release the money early." My father's hands balled into fists. "That money belongs to Courtney. You're just the construction worker, son. What gives you the right to decide when she gets her own inheritance?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. "It's not about rights," I said. "It's about protection." Grandma saw something in Blake's situation. If he's the real deal, if he really loves Courtney, then he won't care about the money. If he's not, then this trust is exactly what Grandma designed it for. My mother's voice turned shrill. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous of your sister. She's successful and beautiful, and now she's marrying a wonderful man, and you can't stand it." I didn't respond to that. There was no point. My father threatened lawyers. He said they'd take me to court. They'd have me removed as trustee. They'd expose my incompetence. They stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there in my work clothes, my coffee gone cold, my toast uneaten. I was going to be late for work, and my family had just declared war on me. I made it through the workday on autopilot. My crew could tell something was wrong, but they knew better than to ask. We finished the foundation pour by 3 in the afternoon. I drove home in my truck, still wearing my dusty work clothes, and found my father sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. He looked smaller than he had that morning. Older, tired. He stood when he saw me. "Can we talk?" I unlocked my apartment and we went inside. I offered him a beer. He accepted. We sat at my small kitchen table. Dad looked at his beer bottle, picking at the label. "Your mother's upset." "I know. Courtney called her 17 times today. Crying. Screaming. She's devastated." I nodded. I'd expected that. Dad took a long drink. "Blake's family is wealthy. Old money. They're expecting a certain level from Courtney. She told them she comes from money too." "Does she?" I asked. "Or does she come from a comfortable middle-class family and a grandmother who was smart enough to invest well?" Dad flinched. "Fair point." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Dad said something that surprised me. "I think we failed you." "What?" "Your mother and I. We always focused on Courtney. She was the pretty one. The social one. You were just so capable. So independent. We figured you'd be fine on your own." I didn't know what to say to that. Dad continued. "We pushed you aside. Made you feel less important. And now you're the one protecting your sister, and we're treating you like the enemy." "I'm just doing what Grandma asked," I said quietly. Dad nodded. He finished his beer. Then he looked at me directly. "I can't go against your mother on this. She won't hear anything against Courtney. But I want you to know I understand why you're doing this." It wasn't much, but it was something. Dad left, and I sat alone in my apartment again. I heated up leftover pizza and was halfway through a slice when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. "Release it." I blocked the number. 10 minutes later, another text from a different number. "You're ruining her life." I blocked that one too. Then my phone rang. "My mother," I answered. Before I could say anything, she started in. "Courtney is suicidal. She can't eat. She can't sleep. Blake is reconsidering the engagement because she lied about her financial situation. You're destroying her future." I closed my eyes. "Mom, if Blake is reconsidering because of money, then he's not the right person. How dare you judge him? You don't know him. And neither does Courtney," I said. They've been together 4 months. She hung up on me. I turned off my phone and went to bed. I had to be up at 5 for work. The next evening, when I got home, Courtney was waiting outside my apartment building. She was dressed like she was going to a charity gala. Designer dress, heels, perfect makeup and hair. But her eyes were red and puffy. "We need to talk," she said. I led her into my apartment. She looked around with barely concealed disgust at my simple furniture, my small television, my basic kitchen. This was the first time she'd been in my home in 3 years. She sat on my couch like she was afraid it might be dirty. Then she looked at me, and her face crumpled. "How could you do this to me?" I sat across from her. "Courtney, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm following Grandma's wishes. Those wishes are ruining my life." I waited. Let her talk. She told me about Blake. About how he proposed with a $200,000 ring. About their wedding plans. A destination ceremony in the Maldives with 80 guests. The budget was already over $1 million. She'd told Blake she had full access to her inheritance. His family was wealthy, established. They were expecting her to match their level. "If I don't have the money," she whispered, "Blake might call off the wedding. His family is already asking questions about why I don't have a career. They think I'm a gold digger." I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. "What do you tell them you do?" She looked down. "I say I'm a consultant." "Courtney," I said gently, "if Blake truly loves you, the money won't matter." "That's easy for you to say. You've never had to maintain a certain lifestyle. You live in this." She gestured around my apartment with contempt. "You're happy being ordinary." I absorbed that hit. "Is that what you think? That I'm ordinary? Aren't you?" I managed millions of dollars in investments successfully for 6 years. I built a skilled career in construction management. I own this apartment outright. I have savings. I have retirement accounts. I did all that without inheritance money. But yeah, I guess I'm just ordinary. Courtney's face reddened. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" She changed tactics. Tears started flowing. "Howard, please. I'm begging you. I need this money. The wedding. The debt." "What debt?" Her face went white. "Nothing." "Courtney. What debt?" She broke down completely then, sobbing, gasping for air. She confessed that she'd been using credit cards to maintain her lifestyle. The monthly allowance wasn't enough to cover her apartment rent, her car payment, her shopping habits, her social life. She was $70,000 in debt. The credit card companies were threatening to sue. She'd been hiding statements, dodging calls. She needed the inheritance money to pay everything off and start fresh. The wedding was secondary. She was drowning and too ashamed to tell anyone. I sat back, processing this. This is exactly why Grandma set up the trust this way. Courtney's tears stopped. Her face hardened. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying let me meet Blake properly. Let me see if this relationship is real. Let me help you create a real financial plan. If everything checks out, we can discuss early distribution." She stood up, shaking. "If you don't release my money, I'll make your life hell. I'll turn everyone against you. I'll take you to court. I'll ruin you." "Courtney." She left, slamming my door just like my parents had. I sat in the silence of my apartment, feeling the weight of everything. I'd tried to protect my sister. I'd tried to honor my grandmother's trust. And now, my entire family hated me for it. 3 days later, during my lunch break at the construction site, my foreman handed me a certified letter. His face was sympathetic. "This looks official, Howard. Everything okay?" I opened it sitting in my truck, my hands still dusty from the morning's work. It was a legal filing. Courtney was suing to have me removed as trustee. The claims were brutal: financial incompetence, conflict of interest, undue influence over a vulnerable beneficiary, and worst of all, embezzlement. She was claiming I'd been taking management fees without authorization for 6 years. My hands started shaking. Every word was a lie. I'd never taken a single cent from that trust. Every fee, every expense, every transaction was documented and legitimate. My coworker Danny knocked on my truck window. He was holding 2 sandwiches and a concern on his weathered face. "Whatever's in that letter can wait. Eat lunch, then deal with it." I couldn't eat. I just stared at the papers. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Courtney had hired Patterson and Associates, one of the biggest law firms in the city. Their retainer alone was probably $50,000. Money she didn't have. She was going deeper into debt to fight me. I left work early and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Steve Harrington had helped Grandma Phyllis set up the trust. He was a good man, honest, with a small practice focused on estate planning. Steve read through the filing, his face growing darker with each page. "This is aggressive, Howard. She's not just asking to remove you as trustee. She's claiming you've been stealing from her. I never took anything. I know that. Your records are immaculate. But accusations like this put you on the defensive. You'll have to prove your innocence, and that costs money." "How much?" "To fight this properly? At least $50,000. Maybe more if it drags out. My savings account had $32,000. I felt sick." Steve saw my face. "I can work at a reduced rate. You'll need to take out a loan for the rest. But Howard, there's something else." "What?" He pointed to a section of the filing. Courtney listed Blake's law firm as a contact reference. His family has connections to the judge assigned to this case, Judge Patricia Brennan. Her daughter married into Blake's extended family. "Are you saying the case is rigged?" "I'm saying it's not a coincidence. Blake might have helped Courtney file in this specific court. The walls felt like they were closing in. So Blake knows about estate law. He helped craft these accusations. He's using his family's connections to stack the deck." Steve nodded grimly. "I think Blake learned about your sister's money and saw an opportunity. This isn't about love, Howard. This is about access to $55 million. Can we prove that?" "Not yet. But I'll start digging into Blake's background. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction with Courtney. Every email. Every text. Don't talk to your parents about the case. Don't confront Blake. Anything you say can be twisted." I left Steve's office feeling like I was underwater. Everything was muffled and slow and wrong. That night, I applied for a personal loan. $20,000 at an interest rate that made me want to cry. But I needed to defend myself. My mother called while I was filling out paperwork. I almost didn't answer. "Your sister told us what you've been doing," she said without preamble. "Taking money from her inheritance. Management fees you never disclosed. We're ashamed of you, Howard." "Mom, that's not true. I never." "She has lawyers, Howard. She has proof. Why would she lie about something like this?" "Because she's desperate. Because she's in debt and needs the money. Don't you dare speak about your sister that way." She hung up. I sat there with my phone in my hand, looking at my modest apartment, my work-worn furniture, my simple life. I'd lived carefully, saved diligently, never asked my family for anything. And they believed I was a thief. The next morning, I got to the construction site early. The sun wasn't even up yet. I stood in the darkness, looking at the foundation we'd poured. Solid and level and perfect. I knew how to build things. I knew how to make things stable and lasting. But I had no idea how to fix my family. The next week crawled by. Work was my only escape. On the site, things made sense. Measurements were exact. Materials behaved predictably. If you did the work right, the structure stood strong. My family was the opposite. Nothing made sense. Every conversation led to accusations. Every attempt at explanation was met with hostility. Steve called me on Friday evening. "I need you to come to my office. Now." I was exhausted from a long day of work, but the urgency in his voice made me drive straight over. Steve's office was in an older building downtown, 3rd floor, no elevator. I climbed the stairs and found him waiting with his door open. He looked excited, nervous, determined. "Sit down," he said. "You need to see this." He spread documents across his desk. "I've been investigating Blake Thornton's background. What I found is disturbing." He walked me through it. Blake had been engaged twice before. Both times to women from wealthy families. Both engagements ended within months of Blake gaining access to or detailed information about family finances. The first woman, Rachel, came from a real estate development family. The engagement lasted 6 months. It ended abruptly after Blake was caught trying to manipulate her father into a bad business deal that would have benefited Blake's firm. The second woman, Jennifer, inherited a tech startup from her deceased brother. Blake convinced her to let him manage the company's investments. Within 3 months, suspicious transactions appeared. Jennifer's lawyer got involved. Blake disappeared before any charges were filed. Jennifer later filed a restraining order against him, but those records were sealed. "This wasn't in his background check?" I asked. "He's careful. He uses different variations of his name. Blake Thornton, B. Thornton, Blake T. Harrison. He's also moved between several financial firms. I found his employment history. He was fired from Richards Financial Group 3 years ago for ethics violations. He concealed that, when he applied to his current firm, Steve pulled out another document. Here's where it gets interesting. Blake has been in communication with Courtney's legal team more than just as a supportive fiancé. He's been strategizing with them. He helped write the embezzlement accusations against you. How do you know that?" Steve smiled slightly. "Courtney's lawyers got sloppy. They sent me discovery documents that included email metadata. Blake wrote several drafts of the complaint. The embezzlement angle was his idea. He's manipulating her. Completely. And he's doing it to get access to that $55 million. I felt rage building in my chest. We need to tell Courtney." Steve held up his hand. "She won't believe you. She'll think you fabricated everything to keep control of the money. We need to expose him in court, with evidence she can't deny. Then there's something else." Steve pulled out a printed email. "I received this 2 days ago. Anonymous sender. It's from another woman Blake targeted 3 years ago. Her name is Angela. She lost $400,000 to one of Blake's investment schemes. She's willing to testify if it helps stop him from hurting someone else." I read Angela's testimony. It was detailed and damning. Blake had promised to invest her inheritance in a specialized fund. The money disappeared into offshore accounts. By the time Angela realized what happened, Blake was gone, and her money was unrecoverable. "Can we use this in court?" Steve nodded. "It establishes a pattern. But Howard, you need to understand something. Even with all this evidence, we might not win. Judge Brennan has connections to Blake's family. She might rule in Courtney's favor regardless. So what do? We prepare the best case possible. We expose Blake for what he is. And we hope that when Courtney sees the truth, she'll do the right thing." I left Steve's office with a folder full of damning evidence against Blake. I should have felt hopeful. Instead, I felt terrified. Because I knew my sister. When confronted with uncomfortable truths, she doubled down. She'd convinced herself Blake was her salvation. Showing her he was actually her destroyer might break her completely. That night, my father showed up at my apartment again. It was late. Almost 10. He looked terrible. "Can I come in?" We sat at my kitchen table again. This was becoming a routine. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said. "She'd be furious." I waited. Dad pulled out his phone and showed me text messages. Courtney had been sending him frantic messages all week. She was falling apart. The wedding planning had stopped. Blake's parents were asking pointed questions about her finances. Courtney was terrified Blake would leave her. I showed Dad the folder Steve had given me. All the evidence about Blake's past. The failed engagements. The ethics violations. The theft from Angela. Dad read everything in silence. When he finished, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "My God. He's a predator." I nodded. "And he's using Courtney to get to the money. We have to tell her." "She won't believe us," I said. "She'll think we made it up. Then we show her in court. Make it public." "Dad," I said carefully, "if we do this, it's going to destroy her. She's built her entire identity around this relationship, this wedding, this fantasy life. When it all collapses, I don't know what will happen to her." My father looked old right then, older than I'd ever seen him. "What's the alternative? We let her marry a con artist and lose everything?" We sat in heavy silence. Finally, Dad said, I can't testify against Courtney in court. It would destroy your mother. Our marriage wouldn't survive it. I understand. But I believe you. I believe you're doing the right thing. And when this is all over, when Courtney finally sees the truth, I'll be there to help her pick up the pieces. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Dad left, and I was alone again with the evidence of Blake's crimes, and the knowledge that in 1 week, I'd be standing in a courtroom fighting for my integrity while my sister fought to destroy me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandma Phyllis, the last conversation we'd had before she died. She'd been in hospice, frail and weak, but her mind was sharp. She'd taken my hand. Howard, she said, I'm giving you a terrible burden. Courtney is going to hate you for this. Your parents won't understand, but I need you to be strong. I'll do my best, Grandma. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. You're the only one I trust. You know what real value is. You know that money is just a tool, not a purpose. Courtney needs to learn that. This trust will teach her, but it's going to hurt first. She'd been right about everything. The courthouse was downtown, an old stone building with marble floors and high ceilings. I arrived early with Steve. We went through security and found the courtroom on the 3rd floor. Courtney was already there with her legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits, and Blake, sitting beside her, his hand on her knee, looking confident and supportive. He was handsome in that polished way. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect posture. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost $3,000. He caught my eye and smiled. Cold, calculating. Just for a second, the mask dropped, and I saw what he really was. Then he turned to Courtney and whispered something that made her nod. My mother Linda sat in the gallery behind Courtney. She wouldn't look at me. My father Frank sat in the back row, trying to be neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Judge Patricia Brennan entered, and we all stood. She was in her late 50s, gray hair pulled back severely, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She took her seat and looked over the case file. The proceedings began. Courtney's lead attorney, Marcus Patterson, stood to present their case. He was good, smooth, convincing. He painted me as an unqualified trustee who'd somehow manipulated a dying woman into giving him control of a fortune. He suggested I was jealous of my sister's success, that I'd used the trust to maintain power over her. He claimed I'd taken excessive management fees, made questionable investment decisions, and refused reasonable requests for information. It all sounded plausible if you didn't know the truth. Then Blake was called to testify. He took the stand confidently. He stated his credentials. Senior Financial Advisor at Thornton Hayes Investments, 15 years of experience. Series 7 and 63 licenses. Impressive resume. Marcus asked him about reviewing the trust documents. Blake said he'd examined them thoroughly as part of his due diligence before proposing to Courtney. He wanted to understand her financial picture. Responsible planning, he called it. He listed concerns about my management. The investment strategy was too conservative, he claimed. I'd missed opportunities for growth. With proper management, the estate could have been worth $70 million instead of $55 million. I'd cost Courtney $15 million in potential gains. It sounded damning. People in the gallery murmured. Steve stood for cross-examination. He was calm, methodical. Mr. Thornton, you've reviewed the trust documents thoroughly? Yes, Blake answered confidently. And you're engaged to Miss Morrison? Yes, we're planning our wedding. Steve walked slowly toward the witness stand. Interesting. Because the trust specifically prevents early distribution if the trustee suspects the beneficiary is marrying someone who is financially motivated. Did you notice that clause? Blake's confidence flickered. I'm not after her money. Steve pulled out a document. Then you won't mind the court reviewing your financial history, your previous relationships, for instance. Marcus jumped up. Objection. Relevance? Judge Brennan looked interested. I'll allow limited questioning. Steve presented evidence of Blake's 2 previous engagements to wealthy women. Blake tried to dismiss them as coincidence. Just relationships that didn't work out. Then Steve brought out Angela's written testimony. The courtroom went silent as Steve read excerpts. A woman who'd lost $400,000 to Blake's investment scheme. Detailed documentation of how he'd manipulated her, gained her trust, and stolen her inheritance. Blake's face went red. That's fabricated. I've never seen that woman's testimony before. But the cracks were showing. His polished demeanor was slipping. Steve then presented the email communications between Blake and Courtney's lawyers. The metadata showing Blake had drafted portions of the complaint against me. That he'd suggested the embezzlement accusations. Judge Brennan leaned forward, studying the document Steve handed up. I watched Courtney's face. She looked confused. Scared. She kept glancing at Blake, who was now visibly sweating on the witness stand. Marcus tried to redirect. Your Honor, even if Mr. Thornton's character is questionable, that doesn't prove Mr. Morrison is a competent trustee. He called their financial expert, a man named Gerald Simmons with credentials from Columbia. Gerald testified that my investment strategy had been overly conservative, that with a more aggressive approach, the estate could have seen 30% higher returns. He made me sound incompetent, risk-averse to the point of negligence. Steve countered that conservative strategies protect the principal investment. That preservation of capital was appropriate for a trust designed to last decades. But the damage was done. I looked incompetent next to Blake's smooth expertise and Gerald's academic credentials. Judge Brennan called a recess. During the break, I saw Courtney and Blake in the hallway. They were arguing in fierce whispers. Courtney was crying. You've been lying to me? Blake grabbed her arm. Baby, they're trying to turn you against me, don't you see? They're manipulating you. But those women, that testimony, all lies, fabricated by your brother to keep control of your money. Courtney looked torn, confused. She'd built her entire world around Blake, and that world was crumbling. Blake saw me watching. His eyes went cold and hard, just for a second. Then he put his arm around Courtney, gentle and protective, and led her away. We returned to the courtroom. I had to testify. I explained my management of the trust, every investment decision, every fee, every communication with Courtney that went unanswered. Marcus cross-examined me aggressively. Why didn't I hire professional managers? Why didn't I inform the family about the trust? Why did I think I was qualified to manage millions of dollars? I answered truthfully, because Grandma Phyllis trusted me, because she'd seen what happened when Courtney had access to money without limits, because this was about protection, not control. It didn't sound convincing, even to my own ears. Finally, closing arguments. Marcus painted me as a controlling, jealous brother. Steve painted Blake as a con artist and me as a faithful trustee. Both versions couldn't be true. Judge Brennan took a long time reviewing the evidence. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. Finally, she spoke. This case presents difficult questions about family dynamics, financial competence, and the intent of the original truster. I've reviewed all the evidence carefully. She looked at me. Mr. Morrison, your management of the trust has been technically adequate. Your record-keeping is impeccable. I see no evidence of actual embezzlement. Relief flooded through me. But Judge Brennan continued. However, the evidence also suggests that your relationship with your sister has broken down completely. Trust administration requires good faith and communication. That no longer exists here. My heart sank. Additionally, while Mr. Thornton's past is concerning, that alone doesn't prove current malfeasance. People can change. And regardless of his character, the question before me is whether Mr. Morrison should continue as trustee. She took a breath. I'm removing Mr. Morrison as trustee. I'm appointing a professional third-party trustee, Hammond Financial Trust Services. Pending a full investigation. The estate will be frozen for a minimum of 6 months, while both Mr. Morrison and Mr. Thornton are investigated thoroughly. Neither Miss Morrison nor Mr. Morrison will have access to the funds during this period. No, this couldn't be happening. Courtney let out a sob. I need that money. The wedding is in 3 months. Blake looked furious. The careful mask was gone. Pure anger flashed across his face. Judge Brennan banged her gavel. This hearing is adjourned. The court's order will be filed by end of business today. It was over. Everyone lost. I'd been removed from the position Grandma Phyllis entrusted to me. Courtney couldn't access the money she desperately needed. Blake's plan to get the inheritance was ruined. My parents sat in the gallery looking devastated. Steve touched my arm. "I'm sorry, Howard. We did everything we could." I nodded, numb. As we left the courtroom, I saw Courtney collapsed in a chair, sobbing. Blake stood apart from her, on his phone, already moving on to whatever his next scheme would be. My mother rushed to Courtney. My father caught my eye and gave a small nod. He believed me now, but it was too late. I walked out of the courthouse into cold afternoon air. I'd done everything right. I'd been honest, careful, responsible, and I'd lost everything that mattered. 3 weeks passed in a fog. I worked long hours, came home exhausted, and avoided everyone. Steve called periodically with updates. The investigation was proceeding. The professional trustee was reviewing all my records. Everything checked out so far, but the process was slow. My legal bills had climbed to $48,000. The loan payments were crushing. I picked up weekend side jobs to make ends meet. I'd stopped answering my mother's calls. My father texted occasionally, just checking in. I appreciated it but didn't know what to say. Then one evening, 3 weeks after the hearing, my doorbell rang. I considered not answering. I was tired. I had work in the morning. I just wanted to heat up some soup and go to bed. But I opened the door. Courtney stood there. She looked completely different. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger, smaller, vulnerable. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. She walked into my apartment and stood awkwardly in my living room. I closed the door and waited. "Blake left me," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't say that. She sat on my couch. The same couch she'd looked at with contempt a month ago. Now she sank into it, like she needed its support to stay upright. She told me what happened. After the hearing, Blake stayed for 2 days. He kept saying they'd get the money eventually, that the investigation would clear everything up, that they'd be fine. But Courtney started asking questions. About his past engagements, about Angela's testimony, about why he'd helped write the lawsuit against me. Blake got angry, defensive. He told her she was paranoid, that I'd poisoned her mind against him. Then Courtney found his phone unlocked one morning. She wasn't trying to snoop. It was just there on the kitchen counter, screen lit up with a text conversation. The messages were to someone named Marcus, not her lawyer Marcus. A different Marcus. Blake was texting. "The Morrison deal is dead. Moving to California next week. Found another prospect. Tech money this time. Easier Mark." When Courtney confronted him, Blake didn't even try to deny it. He just looked at her coldly and said, "You're broke and crazy. Good luck with your debt." He packed his things and left within an hour. Courtney's voice was mechanical as she told me this, like she was reading someone else's story. "The engagement ring was fake," she continued. "I had it appraised. The stones are cubic zirconia, worth maybe $800. She looked at me then. "You were right about everything. Grandma was right about me." She started crying. Not dramatic sobs like before, just quiet tears running down her face. "The debt is worse than I told you. It's $120,000 now. I can't make the minimum payments anymore. I'm going to lose my apartment. My car is getting repossessed next week. I have nowhere to go." She looked around my modest apartment. All my friends were really Blake's friends. They've all ghosted me. I have nothing. I am nothing. I sat down across from her. "What do you want to do now?" "I don't know." She wiped her face. "I've never had to actually take care of myself. Mom and Dad always bailed me out. Then, it was Grandma's allowance. Then, I thought it would be Blake. I don't know how to be an adult. I made a decision then. You can stay here. We'll figure it out." Courtney looked up, shocked. "After everything I did to you? You're still my sister." She started crying harder. "I don't deserve your help." "Maybe not, but I'm offering it anyway." and so Courtney moved into my spare room. The room I used for storage, filled with boxes and old furniture. We cleared it out together. I gave her my extra bed, some basic furniture. It wasn't much, but it was clean and safe. The first week was awkward. Courtney didn't know how to cook, how to do laundry, how to grocery shop on a budget. I taught her, patiently, the way Grandma Phyllis had taught me years ago. I helped her create a real budget. We listed all her debts, all her income. The math was ugly. The monthly allowance of $8,000 was still coming, but it wasn't enough to cover her debt payments and living expenses if she kept her expensive apartment and car. So we made hard choices. She gave up the apartment, let the car go to repossession, canceled the credit cards. We created a payment plan for her debts. It would take years, but it was possible. Courtney got a job. It took 2 weeks of applications, but she was finally hired as a receptionist at a medical office. The pay was modest, $14 an hour, but it was honest work. I watched her leave for her first day, wearing clothes from Target instead of designer boutiques, and I felt something like pride. My mother was horrified when she found out Courtney was living with me. She called it humiliating. Linda wanted to give Courtney money to maintain her lifestyle. My father stopped her. For the first time in their marriage, Frank put his foot down and said no. Courtney needed to learn. And Linda's enabling had contributed to the problem. That caused its own crisis in my parents' marriage, but that wasn't my problem to solve. Courtney and I fell into a routine. We'd have coffee together in the mornings before work. She'd tell me about her job, the patients she met, the medical terminology she was learning. She seemed genuinely interested. In the evenings, we'd make dinner together. Simple meals, nothing fancy. Pasta, chicken, and vegetables. Tacos. She was a terrible cook at first, but she improved. We'd watch television sometimes, or just talk. Real conversations. Not about money or status or social hierarchies. Just sibling conversations about life and memories and what we wanted for the future. 3 months after she moved in, Courtney came home excited. She'd been promoted. Not a big promotion, just as senior receptionist with a small raise. But she was proud. That night, we celebrated with ice cream from the grocery store. We sat on my couch, eating straight from the containers, and Courtney said something that surprised me. "I'm happier now than I've been in years." I looked at her. Really? Really? I hated my old life. The constant pressure to look perfect, to have the best things, to compete with everyone. It was exhausting. Now I just work and come home and watch bad television with you. It's so simple, and I can breathe. I smiled. Grandma would be proud. Courtney's face got serious. Do you think she knew this would happen? That I'd have to lose everything to find out who I really am? I think she hoped you'd figure it out before you lost everything. But she designed the trust to protect you in case you didn't. We sat in comfortable silence, eating our ice cream. Then Courtney said quietly, "I'm ready to apologize to Steve and to the court. For the false accusations, I want to make it right." It was a start. The next week, Courtney signed a legal affidavit. She admitted the embezzlement accusations were false. She explained how Blake had manipulated her, how desperate she'd been, how wrong she'd been to attack me. Steve filed it with the court. It helped my case considerably. The investigation concluded 2 weeks later. The professional trustee issued their report. My management of the estate had been exemplary. Textbook perfect, they called it. Every investment was appropriate. Every fee was standard and documented. Every decision was in the beneficiary's best interest. They recommended I be reinstated as trustee. A new hearing was scheduled. This time, the courtroom felt different. Courtney sat beside me instead of across from me. She testified on my behalf. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "I was wrong about my brother. He protected me when I couldn't protect myself. He honored our grandmother's wishes even when it cost him everything. He deserves to be reinstated." Judge Brennan listened carefully. She asked Courtney questions about her changes over the past months. Courtney answered honestly. She'd gotten a job. She was paying off debt. She was learning financial responsibility. Judge Brennan reviewed the professional trustee's report. Then she looked at me. Mr. Morrison, this court owes you an apology. The evidence is clear that you managed this trust faithfully and well. I'm reinstating you as trustee, effective immediately. Relief washed over me like warm water. But Judge Brennan continued. However, I'm adding a condition. Miss Morrison must complete a financial education program before any early distribution can be considered. 6 months minimum. If she completes it successfully, and if you both agree, early partial distribution may be appropriate. Courtney and I looked at each other. We both nodded. We agree, Your Honor. The judge smiled slightly. Good. This case is closed. And Mr. Morrison, for what it's worth, your grandmother chose well. We left the courthouse together. Courtney, my father, Steve, and me. My mother was absent. She was still angry about everything, still refusing to accept how wrong she'd been. That was her choice. But the 4 of us went to dinner at a simple diner. We ordered burgers and fries and talked about normal things. It felt good. 6 months passed. Courtney completed the financial education courses with perfect scores. She'd also been promoted again at work, now to office manager. She'd paid off $60,000 of her debt through strict budgeting and occasional overtime. One evening, she approached me carefully. I think I'm ready, she said. Not for all of it, but for enough to finish paying off my debt and buy a small place, nothing fancy, just a modest condo near my work. I reviewed everything, her bank statements, her budget, her payment history, her credit report. She'd changed completely. I approved a partial early distribution, $250,000, enough to clear her remaining debt, buy a small condo, and have a solid emergency fund. The rest would stay invested until she turned 35, less than 2 years away now. When the money transferred to her account, Courtney cried. But these were different tears, not tears of desperation or grief, tears of gratitude and accomplishment. She'd earned this. Thanksgiving arrived. 1 full year after my mother's phone call telling me not to come. This year was different. Courtney insisted on hosting at her new place. It was a small 2-bedroom condo in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy. No marble countertops or designer appliances. But it was clean and bright. And hers. She'd spent the week preparing. She watched YouTube tutorials on cooking turkey, making stuffing, baking pies. She called me 17 times with questions. How do you know when the turkey is done? Should the cranberry sauce be smooth or chunky? Can you mess up mashed potatoes? I answered every question patiently. Thanksgiving Day came. I arrived early to help. Courtney was already stressed, her kitchen a disaster of mixing bowls and vegetable peelings. But she was happy, really happy. We cooked together. I showed her how to check the turkey temperature, how to make gravy without lumps, how to time everything so it finished together. My father arrived next, carrying wine and flowers. He hugged both of us. He looked better than he had in months. Lighter. Then my mother came. Linda stood in the doorway, looking around Courtney's modest condo. I watched her face. She was seeing her daughter's life now. Simple, middle class, normal. I thought she might criticize. Might make a comment about how far Courtney had fallen from her previous lifestyle. But she didn't. Instead, tears filled her eyes. She walked to Courtney and hugged her tight. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't teach you better. Courtney hugged her back. It's okay, Mom. I'm okay now. We sat down to dinner at Courtney's small dining table. The turkey was slightly overcooked. The stuffing was a bit dry. The gravy had a few lumps. But it was the best Thanksgiving meal I'd ever had. During dinner, Courtney raised her glass. She'd insisted on sparkling cider instead of champagne. She said she was learning to appreciate simple things. I want to make a toast, she said. Her voice was steady and clear. Last year, I was ashamed of my brother's blue-collar job. I thought success meant designer clothes and expensive cars and impressing people I didn't even like. This year, I have a blue-collar job too. I clock in. I work hard. I earn my paycheck. And I've never been more proud of honest work. She looked at me. Howard, you saved my life. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she chose you. You loved me even when I didn't deserve it. You protected me from myself. Thank you. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. My father raised his glass. To second chances. My mother raised hers too, tears streaming down her face. To family. We drank our sparkling cider and ate our imperfect meal, and it was perfect anyway. After dinner, Courtney and I cleaned up while my parents sat in the living room. We worked side by side, washing dishes and putting away leftovers. I met someone, Courtney said suddenly. I looked at her. Yeah? She smiled. His name is Tim. He's a nurse at the medical office. Nothing fancy. He drives a 10-year-old Honda and lives with a roommate. But he's kind. He makes me laugh. He doesn't care that I was almost bankrupt or that I live in a small condo. He just likes me. Her face was glowing, in a way it never had when she talked about Blake. I'd like to meet him, I said. She grinned. Next week. Coffee. Low pressure. We finished the dishes and joined my parents. We sat together, talking about normal things. My father's golf game. My mother's book club. Courtney's co-workers. My current construction project. No one mentioned the lawsuit. No one mentioned Blake. No one mentioned the trust. We were just a family, imperfect, healing, together. As the evening wound down and my parents prepared to leave, I walked to the window. Courtney's condo overlooked a small park. Families were walking their dogs. Kids were playing on the swings. Courtney came to stand beside me. You thinking about Grandma? Yeah, me too. She put her arm around my shoulders. Do you think she knew how hard this would be? I think she knew exactly how hard it would be, and she trusted us to get through it anyway. Courtney leaned her head on my shoulder. We did, though. We got through it. On the wall beside us was a photo of Grandma Phyllis. Courtney had put it up in a simple frame. Grandma was smiling, her eyes warm and knowing. I whispered, "We got there, Grandma. We got there." The last year had been brutal. I'd lost my family's respect, faced false accusations, racked up massive debt, and nearly lost everything that mattered. My sister had lost her fiancé, her lifestyle, her illusions about herself. But we'd both gained something infinitely more valuable. We'd learned that real security doesn't come from money. It comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. We'd learned that love sometimes means protecting people from themselves, even when they hate you for it. We'd learned that family isn't about being perfect together. It's about not giving up on each other when everything falls apart. Courtney had transformed from someone who measured worth in designer labels to someone who took pride in a job well done. She'd learned to live within her means, to value relationships over possessions, to find joy in simple things. And I'd learned that doing the right thing doesn't always lead to immediate victory. Sometimes it leads through fire and pain and loss. But on the other side of that fire, there's something better than victory. There's redemption. Grandma Phyllis's trust had done exactly what she designed it to do. Not by giving Courtney money, but by forcing her to discover who she could be without it. The $55 million was still there, still growing, still waiting. In less than 2 years, Courtney would get full access, but I wasn't worried anymore. She'd proven she could handle it. She'd proven she understood what truly mattered. And when that day came, I knew she'd use it wisely. Maybe she'd invest in her future. Maybe she'd start a business. Maybe she'd give some away to help others who were struggling like she had been. Whatever she chose, it would be the right choice, because she'd become the person Grandma Phyllis always believed she could be. As I drove home that night, my small apartment waiting, my work boots by the door ready for tomorrow's shift, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt peace. The construction foreman who wasn't good enough to sit at his own family's Thanksgiving table had protected a $55 million fortune, survived a legal assault, and helped his sister find her way back to herself. That was worth more than any inheritance. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, even when they couldn't see it was for their own good? Have you stood your ground when everyone told you that you were wrong? Sometimes, the hardest part of loving someone is watching them struggle, knowing that your help might actually hurt them in the long run. Grandma Phyllis understood that. She gave me the hardest job imaginable, but also the most important one. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt like the underestimated one in your family, or if you've ever had to be strong for someone who couldn't be strong for themselves, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where doing the right thing made you look like the villain? Share your story. Let's talk about it. And if you found value in this story, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real family struggles and how ordinary people find extraordinary strength. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe someone who's dealing with their own family conflicts, or someone who's learning hard lessons about money and responsibility. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope it reminded you that sometimes the people who challenge us the most are actually trying to save us. And I hope it encouraged you to stand firm in your convictions, even when the whole world seems against you. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and remember that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in character, integrity, and the courage to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. Until next time,